Oh, it's Wednesday, February the 12th. Fear. What kind of things are you afraid of? How do you deal with fear? Well, in the word for you today, in Exodus chapter 14, verse 15, talks about how fear is the enemy of growth. In Exodus it says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on.'" Well, what's happening here? Well, the Israelites had been slaves in Egypt. God sent Moses and Aaron to go to Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." Well, you know the story. Pharaoh says no. So God sent 10 plagues upon Egypt, and eventually Pharaoh said, "Go." So the Hebrew people are leaving Egypt, and they're walking away, and they're not going the most direct way to where they're going around a different way. And all of a sudden, Pharaoh changes his mind, and he decides to go after the people with his army. So here comes Pharaoh with his army, and the people see Pharaoh coming. They've got Pharaoh coming in one direction, and they've got the Red Sea hemming them in. They are trapped. And they start criticizing Moses and saying, wasn't it enough that we had to leave Egypt and die out here? Are there not enough graves in Egypt that you brought us out here to die? And they just were giving him all kinds of grief. That's where God is saying to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on." And you remember what happened? Moses extended his staff over the Red Sea, and God parted the waters, and the people went through. Now, there are times in our lives when we come and we see an enemy coming and look like we're trapped. We're boxed in, and there's nothing that we can do. And so what do? Well, oftentimes we're afraid. We fear. Could be a health situation. Could be financial, relationship, uncertainty about the future. There's all kinds of things that could create fear in our lives. So how do we handle fear when those times come? Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3 and 4 says, "You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you," you being God, "because he trusts in you." He would be us. "Trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord God is an everlasting rock." What is this verse teaching us about how to handle fear? Well, focus on God and not the problem. You keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you. Focus on God and not the problem. Second thing, trust that God is bigger than the problem. See, if God's not able to take care of the problem, then yeah, we have every reason to be afraid. But God is bigger than any problem that we're going to have. The third thing, remember that what God has done in the past. When God does something in your life, he answers a prayer, or he just does something and you go, "Wow, that had to be God." You ever write that down? You ever record that in a journal or something where you can go back and remember it and read it? See, we have this thing called forgetfulness, and something happens in our lives and you think, "Man, I'll never forget this." We tend to forget those things. And as you pray, can you remember the last prayer that God answered for you? You know, if you're praying at all, God has answered some of your prayers. Some of them are yet to be answered, but if we don't write those things down, folks, we tend to forget them. And as we write them down, we start realizing all that God is doing in our lives. It's amazing. It's amazing. Have a written record of how God has answered your prayers and what he has done in your life. So focus on God, not the problem. Trust that God is bigger than the problem. Remember what God has done in the past. And then the fourth thing, our enemy seeks to get us to focus on fear. Don't give in to that. Keep your focus on God. Because when we focus on fear, we become paralyzed with inaction. When we focus on God, we see answers, we see hope, we see strength. So what is your focus on today? Is it the headlines and the news stories? Man, if you want fear, just watch the news for a while. Or is your hope in God? It's amazing. You get away from the news, and life doesn't seem near as bad. Now, I don't mean stick your head in the sand. Don't pay attention to what's going on in the world. Don't mean that at all. But sometimes we can get so obsessed with watching the news that we get so fearful of everything and we forget and leave God out of it. There was a time in 1937, the Golden Gate Bridge was the longest suspension bridge in the world. During the first phase of the project, 23 men fell to their death. There were very few safety devices, and things seemed to be going from bad to worse. So about halfway through, they stopped the work. And what they did, they reorganized, and they built the largest net ever constructed, and they built it underneath where the men were working on the bridge. A couple things happened. Number one, the work went faster. You know why? The men weren't afraid. 10 men fell, but they were saved by the net. And each time one of those men fell and was saved by the net, it gave all the other men confidence that, you know what? I can work, because if I do fall, I'm going to be safe. See, that's the assurance we have with God. There are times we're going to fall. There are times we're going to fail. And God is better than any safety net. We'll fall, but you know what? God will protect us. He'll help us up. Does it mean we won't be hurt? No, it doesn't mean we won't be hurt. But God will pick us up, straighten us out, and go on. Fear is the enemy of growth. Those men worked a lot slower when they were so afraid of falling to their death. But when they knew if they fell, and they'd be all right. Same way with us. We're willing to try things if we know that even if we fail, we're going to be all right. And if we're trying things for God, He is our safety net. Is there anything you're afraid of trying for God today? Do you trust Him to be your safety net? He is. He is. Have a good day.